What's up, guys? Is Airbnb dead in 2025? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. And I'm also going to break down the 3 Airbnb strategies and business models that you can take advantage of as a beginner in 2025 and into the future if you do Airbnb and short-term rentals correctly. And that is exactly what I'm going to share with you on today's video. My name is Almahdi. For those of you that don't know me, I have a multiple 7-figure Airbnb portfolio, and this entire channel is dedicated to teaching you how to start your Airbnb from scratch and beating out your competition. So let's get right into it. So has Airbnb died? You might be seeing a bunch of content since last year even, and even maybe the year before, that Airbnb has completely changed, which is true. So what exactly has changed? If you've recently been on the Airbnb app specifically, you'll notice that they actually added something called Airbnb experiences, where you can hire a chef, you can hire masseuses, all sorts of services, and offer them at your property on Airbnb. That is something that you can take advantage of if you are a host that knows what they are doing. So that's one of the bigger changes that's happened on that Airbnb platform. But if we take a step back and talk about Airbnb and short-term rentals, really is what we're talking about as a whole, is there still a great opportunity for that? And the answer is absolutely, but there are some changes. And I will tell you the biggest change that has happened from the previous kind of version of Airbnb is the old way of Airbnb 3, 4, 5 years ago. You used to be able to just throw up anything on Airbnb. People didn't really know what they were doing. You could just put in some very average furniture and make decent money. You could just not really know what you're doing, not put too much thought into the design, not have anything crazy in there, and you would still do great. So what has changed? Okay? Changes in 2025 and beyond. Number 1 is importance of amenities. Okay? The importance of your amenities. Now, what do I mean by amenities? Pickleball, basketball courts, really decking out your backyard, bunch of games, game rooms. These are the sorts of things that you need in your properties for you to beat out all of the competition, because there's so many people that have maybe tried Airbnb, but guess what? That creates an opportunity for you and I that really know what we're doing if we're able to have great amenities that stand out and make people want to click on your listing. So in the later part of the video, I'm going to go into purchasing, Airbnb rental arbitrage, and co-hosting, and explaining exactly how they all work. But regardless of the method that you choose, your amenities at the property are going to make or break your business from being profitable, or you being like many hosts that are having a difficult time because they are not doing Airbnb and have not adapted to the new methods and the new rules of how Airbnb is working and going to work in the future. The second that has changed is people, and they go hand in hand, by the way, right? They're pretty similar. People are looking for experiences. All right? So this ties in with your amenities and the importance of the amenities, because when people go to an Airbnb, what you're going to see a lot of is they want to have a place where they can take photos. We're in the social media era. You want to be able to share photos, share memories with your friends, your family, taking these vacations, whether it's a weekend, a week long, or even a month, right? You want to be able to have a memorable experience that you can just look back on, take Instagrammable moments, those sorts of photos. And the properties that have all these amenities, for instance, I've mentioned that I've installed a pickleball court recently. That has elevated my properties. Golf, little driving ranges, putt-putt ranges, all of those things are what people end up commenting on and being more inclined to leave a 5-star review because they just had a great time. So you want to make it so that ideally you'll end up with reviews such as, we didn't even need to leave the property. We had a great time. There was so much to do. Those are the properties that I want you to get and want you to find, which, by the way, for those of you that are interested in one-on-one mentorship, you can click the link in the description. I work with a select handful of people every single month, and it is capped. So just fill out an application and apply. I teach you how to start your Airbnb from zero all the way to scaling to your very first property and scaling beyond that. That is something that is available. And you can also click on the link in the description. I have a completely free course that teaches you how to start your Airbnb from A to Z. So back to how we do that, I teach you how to find the right property. Airbnb is all about finding the right property. And if you get the right property in the right market, then you can either, whether you get it with the amenities or build the amenities, that's what's going to differentiate you from the rest of your competition and keep your calendar booked and being able to charge top dollar. So experiences. Now, this also, by the way, brings me to what Airbnb is offering, right? You can have people stay at your place and even book a masseuse, book a chef, have chef experiences. So for example, people have stayed at my properties. I have chef's kitchen in a couple of them, and that allows them to hire a chef and just have an entire event or whatever the case is, a family gathering. And that is one of the amenities that it has. It's got a double island, and they'll even leave reviews about that. They'll have an experience, right, that they can remember. So very, very important. And these are just a couple examples of amenities and experiences that are going to take you and your Airbnb to the next level and make sure that it is a profitable endeavor for you. Okay, so those are the key changes in Airbnb. What I want to talk about now is the three main strategies for Airbnb or doing short-term rentals in 2025 and what might be the best one for you. Whether you have decent amount of capital ready and you can purchase a property, or you want to do what is called Airbnb rental arbitrage or co-hosting. I'm going to explain all of those in the next few minutes here. So let's get right into it. The first one, purchasing a property, purchasing an Airbnb. Now remember, you need to do your research, and before you go and make a big investment, know that that property is in an area that is going to allow short-term rentals and is going to be profitable and is positioning you to succeed and beat out your competition with reference to all the amenities that we talked about. Can you get the property with all these amenities, or do you have the option to build them, or however you want to approach it? Make sure that's factored into your budget. So typically you've got, when you purchase a property, let's say the property is 500K. You're typically going to need a loan, right? You're going to need a loan for that property. And what you usually have to do is put 20% down. Now, anyone that's looked at the real estate market lately knows we're in a bit of a tough situation with purchasing because rates are still high, right? Rates are upper sixes all the way to the upper sevens, right? 6.8 to, let's call it 7.8% right now. And if you get what's called an investor's loan, a DSCR, those are pretty much 7.8 all the way to 9% for DSCR. So this is pretty high rates. And that's going to affect what your monthly payment is on your mortgage and whether you're going to cash flow the property. There's also something that you want to do, something that I've done, is purchasing properties using creative financing methods. So something called subject to purchasing. Subject to is when you take over an existing loan when you purchase the property. So the note stays in the previous owner's name and you're making payments on their behalf, and the property transfers over to you as the owner. Okay. Now, what's the advantage of that? You can take over an existing loan if it's in the lower rates. Okay. So very, very powerful. Another thing you can do is seller finance, where you're pretty much having the seller play the bank. And that's a great way for you to purchase property without having to put 20% down and without having to go to the bank and get these really high interest rates right now. So in a nutshell, purchasing the property, listing it on all the platforms, that is owning your Airbnb. So what are the advantages of owning property? What I always tell my students is you eventually want to purchase your property so that you're in the real estate game of tax advantages, which are probably one of the biggest advantages. You obviously have the cash flow if you purchase the right property. And then third is the equity gain. Okay. So those three advantages of purchasing and owning your real estate and your Airbnb make it a complete game changer when you pick the right properties. Okay. So that's purchasing. Number two, the second strategy is for those of you that might not have too much startup capital, and that is called Airbnb rental arbitrage. Okay? Airbnb rental arbitrage. Now, what is Airbnb rental arbitrage? Rental arbitrage is when you find properties that are listed for rent on a longer term basis, so Zillow, Realtor.com, any of these websites, and you find a landlord that is renting out their property, you get their permission, you take over that property in a longer term lease, and you sublet it and you put it on Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, and you arbitrage the difference. So let's say if your rent is $3,000 a month, okay? And you're able to generate $6,000 a month on Airbnb or VRBO, any of these platforms, then what you're able to do is keep the difference. So that is $3,000 a month, and these are just rough numbers. When you find the right deal, you're able to earn $3,000 in your pocket. Of course, after expenses, so you'll have your internet, cable, if you have a pool person, you deduct those expenses, utilities, and then you would net whatever it is. So maybe somewhere around $2,000 after all the expenses, okay? That in a nutshell is how Airbnb arbitrage works. Now, what are your startup costs? Your startup costs are gonna be your first month's rent, right, up front, and your furniture. So you have furniture, okay? Your furniture. So depending on how big your property is, your furniture is the biggest expense that you're gonna have as a startup, but it's much, much less than if you were gonna go purchase a property. So depending on how big the property is, 3 or 4 bedrooms, you're looking at about 10K, 12K, maybe 15K as startup furniture costs, okay? And one of the things that I provide all the students that I work with is a complete furniture list with varying different designs so that you don't even have to go do that. So again, if you're interested in doing that, click the link in the description, and if you qualify to work with me, one of the things you'll get is a separate different design options depending on the type of property you're getting, which is very important. So your furniture, let's call it $10,000 to $15,000 if you're starting from scratch for your furniture. $10,000. Okay, so Airbnb at rental arbitrage is an amazing way to start. You can generate great cash flow, and that will help you build that cash flow snowball so that you can actually end up going to purchase a property and be able to take advantage of all of those tax benefits and equity appreciation. The third strategy, if you have $0 to start, is called co-hosting. And co-hosting costs $0 to start. And essentially what that is, you are playing the property manager. And I'll give you a breakdown. So the way co-hosting works is you would, for instance, go to Zillow or Realtor.com, any of these platforms. You can even go to existing Airbnb listings and contact the hosts that maybe aren't happy with their property managers. But let's stick with the option of reaching out to folks on Zillow. And if they have a property listed that's been sitting for a while, what you're gonna do is approach them and say, hey, why don't we partner? And it's essentially like a revenue sharing model where they're not making money right now. Their property is bleeding every month. They don't have a tenant. You're going to take that property, make sure it's immaculately furnished. You're not paying for the furniture, by the way. They're going to do that. Of course, the property has to be furnished. And you're going to list that property on all of those platforms like Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com. And you're going to manage that the same way you would if you owned the property or did rental arbitrage, but without any of the risk, because you're not getting a lease on it. You're not buying it. You're simply telling them, I'm going to list this property for you and manage it. The cleanings, the guest communication, putting it on all the platforms, and you just take a percentage between 10 and even up to 30% in your pocket. So how does that work? So let's say you found a property that they've got listed for, let's say $4,000, okay? They have not been getting rented out. So that property has just been sitting. The landlord is getting antsy and really wants to get it rented. And what you're going to do is actually help them out, take the property, create all of the automations, everything that I teach you how to do. You're going to take this property and let them know that you could generate even more than what they're asking for long term, because once you list it on these platforms, you could generate more than $4,000 if the property is a long-term lease. Long-term rentals generally generate less income per month than shorter-term rentals, right? So that's where you come in and you add value. So you take this property and let's say you're able to generate, and I'm just giving you rough numbers, about $10,000 a month for this property. Well, you'll take, let's say 20% on average. That's what? $2,000 in your pocket for one property. You don't have any of the risk of ownership. You don't have a lease. And guess what? They're happy. They're happy because what did you do? You just took their empty property and actually made it make money. Okay? So these are some really good numbers. Now, let's say let's go more conservative, right? Let's not even say 10,000. Let's say you're able to generate them $6,000. Okay? Whatever the case is, you're just taking that 20% of whatever you generate for them, and now they're actually making money, and you are also making money. So a great way for you to start, especially if you have very, very limited capital, even less than what it takes to start rental arbitrage. And this is going to generate you cash flow once you get multiple properties. I mean, how would that completely change someone's situation where they can make an extra $1,000, $2,000 a month just for managing the property, setting up the systems? Okay, so a great way for you to get into Airbnb and short-term rentals as a whole. So bringing it back, is Airbnb dead? Absolutely not. The game is completely changed, and if you know how to approach it, especially with having the right amenities in place, getting properties in the right locations, you're going to stand out from all your competition and make Airbnb profitable. And that's exactly what I shared with you today. So again, for those of you that are interested in learning how to do this, you can click the link in the description. I have a completely free course that teaches you how to do this from A to Z. It's completely for free. And for those of you that are more serious about starting your Airbnb business and being walked through it step by step, all the softwares and automations I use, all of the messaging, templates, scripts, all of that, I am happy to work with you. Click the link in the description, click apply, see if you qualify to work with me. And if you do, I'll reach out to you. Be great.